to That Wrestling Podcast.
What's up? Welcome to That Wrestling Podcast. It's Jason, and collectively, the four of us have been talking about how we can add a second show to the podcast feed and to the YouTube channel. Well, from time to time, you'll get one-man shows, a collection of some of us, maybe a show with some of our friends of the show, you know, Barbara Ryan, Simon, if we can figure out time zones and stuff like that. But this one, it's been a crazy weekend in combat sports. And if you've been listening to the show, you know I love the UFC, and UFC 299 was last night. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Francis Ngannou against Anthony Joshua from Friday. We'll get into SmackDown a little bit. And Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. I can't believe I'm saying that sentence, but it's going to happen, and we're going to get into that as well. So don't forget to follow us on social media at That WrestlePod. DMs are always welcome. You can leave comments here if you're watching on YouTube, and Gmails are always welcome, thatwrestlepod@gmail.com. It's been a while since I've done a one-man show. You know, I did the one-man show the day that Bray Wyatt passed away. I think the other three guys were all on vacation, but you know, they're not as into the other combat sports other than wrestling like I am. So here we are. Now, UFC 299 was in Miami, headlined by Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera for the title. And needless to say, the Sugar Show came to the 305 and put on a clinic. Now, I don't have any issue with Sean O'Malley, but being that he is essentially the heir apparent to Conor McGregor, I'm kind of here for the chaos. And the thought of Chito defeating Sean O'Malley was something I was kind of here for, just to see the internet explode. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And, you know, since I moved back to the East Coast, the hardest part about watching the UFC is that it doesn't start until 10 o'clock p.m. So originally I was going to record this after the event ended, but that was at like 1:45 in the morning. And obviously with the time zone change and stuff, or not time zone, spring forward or fall backward or whatever, it is now Sunday afternoon, 3 o'clock on March 10th. And as I look outside, it is snowing. So wonderful. But anyway, UFC 299 had a lot. And I always, like, looking at the card ahead of time, I just thought that this card was going to be better than the upcoming UFC 300 show. And 299 delivered. And during 299, they made the first promo for 300, and it's going to be good. I mean, there's 12 former champions. There's 3 title matches, if you count the BMF title as a real title. But we're here to talk 299. And this was also Dustin Poirier, a guy that doesn't really have a lot more to prove. He's ranked number 5. And Benoit Saint Denis, he's a young guy. He's a lion. And he had the balls to call out Dustin Poirier. And Poirier accepted, because Poirier did the same thing when he was younger. He called out a top 5 guy. Top 5 guy gave him the fight. And the guy who gave Poirier the fight is escaping me at this time. But if I think about it during the show, I will bring it back. But Benoit Saint Denis, just would not give up. The first round, it was all Denis. Second round, Denis. And then all of a sudden, DP caught him with a punch, staggered him. Poirier went for like 9 gauntlet, like guillotine chokes. Couldn't hold any of them. And even during the in between the first and second round, his coach had stopped with the guillotines. He tried it again, didn't get it again, but he ended up knocking out Benoit Saint Denis. And Poirier is one of those guys that, if you have a daughter, you wanted her to date a guy like him. He's just a good stand-up guy. Also on 299, the debut of Michael Venom Page, MVP. Now, this is a guy that had been in Bellator for years, and I had never seen him fight. I heard the name, I knew the name, and obviously when he signed with the UFC, it was a big deal. And he got the Undertaker entrance. Go Google it. Go YouTube it. You'll see what I mean. But I thought it was actually better than when Israel Adesanya did it a couple summers back. MVP is very showman. There were times in the fight he was doing things that I didn't like. Some people find the antics, the dancing, the theatrics of a UFC fight entertaining. I do not. It's a fight. You're there to knock the other guy out. So Page did some stuff against Kevin Holland, and Kevin Holland is a guy that essentially was Venom Page in the UFC before Venom Page got to the UFC. And Holland, by the third round, he was like, what? Like, you could tell there was frustration because the way MVP fights, it's like a octopus. There's just hands and feet coming from everywhere. And it eventually went to decision. MVP did win. And what's next for MVP? Now, this is a big signing, but he is such a different type of animal for the UFC. So I think the only one that really makes sense is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. They both have karate backgrounds, and I think that could be a fun fight. And then the fight that opened the show, Peter Yan, Song Yadong. Now, I'm horrible at picking fights. Always have been, but I knew I was going to be talking about it on the show, so I thought I will make picks. I started out 0-3. Luckily, I got the co-main and the main right. But Peter Yan, he'd been on a bit of a losing streak lately. I still think he beat Sean O'Malley last year. O'Malley beating Peter Yan got the title match with Aljamain Sterling. And then, of course, Sugar knocked out Aljamain, and here we are today. So Peter Yan ended up winning. Like I said, he'd had some recent losses, so I just thought, well, maybe this isn't the time for Peter Yan. Song Yadong trains at Team Alpha Male in Sacramento. Anytime you get to see Uriah Faber on TV, it's always fun. The guy's got a very infectious personality. He's very driven. He's another one. He's just a good guy. And everybody that doesn't like MMA or the UFC, like, oh, they're all fucking animals. No. Much like I said about just Michael Chandler on the show a couple weeks ago with the boys, much like I just said about Dustin Poirier, Uriah Faber is a guy that if you have a daughter, that's the type of guy that you want. So, look, every UFC event has like 12 to 13 fights. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the main card. Also on the main card, it's Hall of Fame season for the UFC as well. And Joanna Jędrzejczyk was, it was known that she will be inducted this summer at International Fight Week. And Joanna is one of those fighters too that she's super nice to everybody. Like, I met her at a meet and greet a few years ago, and she wasn't feeling how I was holding the phone for a selfie, so she just grabbed the phone and did it herself. She was a badass champion. Go look up Joanna against Weili Zhang for a fun women's fight, probably the greatest women's fight of all time. And Joanna did lose. However, a lot of people thought she won, but her face, if it was here, it kind of like ballooned up. She had a big hematoma on her forehead. Her cheek was out there. It was quite the scene. And definitely when I talk to people that aren't really into MMA or the UFC, that is a fight that I show them because it's just a action-packed, I believe it was 5 rounds. Yeah, it was a title match. So it was 5 rounds. And congrats to Joanna for going to the Hall of Fame. UFC 300s in April. I believe it's the 14th or the 13th, one of that weekend. And of course, I will be on my couch like I am for most UFC events and wanting to do another podcast on it. If you're into MMA, you can let us know on social media. You can let us know in the comments below what you thought of UFC 299 and if you want us to do more about mixed martial arts. I've always wanted to do a show about MMA, but the problem is I know a little and I would need a co-host that knows a lot. And unfortunately, I don't know anybody that knows a lot about the UFC or mixed martial arts. And that's the thing, too. I love the UFC, which is MMA. And I know there's a million different MMA groups out there. There's PFL, One, Rise, and every city has their own, like, would be the equivalent to independent wrestling, smaller promotions. In Pittsburgh, 24/7 is the one that's here, and they have a show coming up in April, and I'm looking forward to go and check that out. Kama Worthy, who's from Pittsburgh, was in the UFC for a bit. He is making his return. So it'll be good to see him back in, and especially in a smaller setting, much like I love going to indies. Rather for wrestling, I love going to the indie shows. It's one of those things. Before we get into Friday, of course, well, I guess this is Friday too. WWE 2K24 came out for all platforms. And in recent years, the 2K video game has gotten a lot of dislike. For some reasons, deserved, some not so much. But for this one, there have been some things coming out about the game that are related to real life situations. Vince McMahon is going through some shit. And if it is true, he really is a piece of shit human being. But in the game, his face is being blurred out of some scenes. Also, same situation, terrible guy, WWE Hall of Famer, former president of the United States, Donald Trump, he is being blurred out of the game. And then finally, Brock Lesnar, who was attached, no cuts, no edits. You're going to see me choke right here on the show. So Brock Lesnar was attached to this Vince McMahon situation. I believe the term play date was used. And anyway, Brock was supposed to have a Rumble and WrestleMania run this time, allegedly against Dominic Mysterio, which would have been amazing. But all that got shelved. And Brock was essentially taken off of the website, the roster, and all of his merchandise was majorly discounted. So when the video game came out, it was said that Brock would be in the game because it was too late to take him out, but he would be an unplayable, unlockable character. So it's a video game, and I'm not sure what blurring these people out or making them unavailable does. It's cancel culture. And look, if what Vince did is true, and if Trump, what he has been alleged and having to go to court for is true, and even this Brock Lesnar situation, they should be punished. But all it's doing in video game form is just hurting the game, hurting the product. And I don't know if it's a 2K decision, or maybe I'm just completely out of line. I just feel that it's kind of weird that they're doing this stuff for the video game. And then, of course, as I was prepping for this last night, it came out that Brock Lesnar is back on the internal roster, showed up on the website. So maybe we are going to get a Brock Lesnar return at WrestleMania. It's just a wait and see at this time. Before we get into SmackDown, I just want to talk about Francis Ngannou and Anthony Joshua from Friday. Now, if you don't know, Francis Ngannou was the UFC heavyweight champion. He was severely underpaid and bet on himself when his contract ended. Now, he waited an entire year being inactive after his last UFC fight, which I was at against Cyril Gane. And I just think that betting on yourself is a great way to go. Obviously, I understand people got bills to pay and people to take care of. And if you can't bet on yourself, that's all right too. But what Francis did was legendary. He took a year off, started training for boxing, and wanted to fight Tyson Fury. heavyweight boxing champion of the world, all-time great. And Francis got that fight. And in some cases, people think Francis won. It did go to a judge's decision. You know, in combat sports, they always say never leave it in the judge's hands. Francis did not beat Tyson Fury, but he took him to the limit. So then Francis Ngannou got a fight against probably the second best fighter in the world right now, Anthony Joshua. And look, I'm new to boxing. So if I'm getting these things a little wrong about where they stand in the pantheon of professional boxers in their rank, kiss my ass. I'm just learning here. And we'll get into how I got into boxing in a few minutes. So Ngannou got the fight with Joshua. It happened on Friday. And after a rough first round for Francis Ngannou, Francis got knocked down in the second. He stood up, and as soon as the fight resumed, Anthony Joshua knocked out Francis Ngannou. It was a scary sight, seeing a man as big as Francis Ngannou knocked out. And I know people get knocked out in the UFC all the time, but I'm new to boxing. And people are shitting on Francis Ngannou. But look, man, look what this guy's done. In 2 years, he has gotten his first 2 boxing matches against the two of the greatest. And he got paid, reportedly $40 million between the 2 fights. And if you're going to judge Francis's boxing ability by this, I mean, if I would say Francis sucks, I wouldn't know what I'm talking about because I'm new to boxing. But I would be wrong because what the guy has done in a short amount of time is nothing short of amazing. And look, will he continue boxing? He may want to go down a few levels in talent of his opponents. He also signed a deal with PFL, so hopefully we get Francis in back in MMA sooner than later. And look, the boxing thing was it was quite the run. I watched that Fury fight, and I could not believe what I was seeing. Much like when Conor McGregor fought Floyd Mayweather years back. You know, Floyd, they say, toyed with Conor for the first 4 rounds, but it was still cool to see an MMA guy go into the boxing world and almost defeat the champ. Friday didn't go so well for Francis, and I'm curious to see what's next. I'm sure he'll be popping up on media here in the next week or two because he's a stand-up guy. Even when he loses, he loses with dignity and loses and is a professional because he knows losses are part of the game. Let's go to SmackDown on Friday. Show opens with Logan Paul, and everybody hates Logan Paul. So what does Logan Paul do? Makes people hate him even more. He announces that the Prime logo will be in the center of the ring starting at WrestleMania. Much like the UFC has sponsored logos on the Octagon mat, I wonder where WWE learned that. It's such a cool idea. Logan Paul brings out KSI, and I don't know how many people actually know who KSI is. It's his business partner. He's a boxer, and he was an influencer boxer. I think he's a musician, but he's Logan Paul's partner in Prime. They talk some talk. Randy Orton's music hits, comes up behind them. Logan escapes the RKO, but KSI does not. And KSI took that RKO like a pro, like he's been training forever. So I would not be surprised if we see KSI in a WWE ring sooner than later. And then, of course, the fun part, Randy being Randy, picks up the bottle of Prime that Logan Paul was drinking from, takes a big swig and says, "This is really good." They just released a new strawberry banana flavor. And coincidentally enough, Friday night, I had it for the first time too. Thanks, Philip. And it is really good. So it looks like we're going to get Logan Paul, Randy Orton at WrestleMania. A lot of people think that Kevin Owens may get thrown into the mix. Maybe KSI now, LA Knight, who knows? But the fact that Prime is the ring sponsor moving forward for PLEs is something that I absolutely love. Absolutely love. And then, of course, on SmackDown, we got the answer. Cody and Seth versus Roman and Diareha Dwayne at night one of WrestleMania. And it was a weird segment. I mean, they had an entire segment of just entrances. Then they went to commercial, and then the final segment of SmackDown. And I'm not sure who is running production for WWE, but they can't have Diareha Dwayne up against the clock because he can never deliver. He looked lost. I felt like his promo was just a lot of like unpreparedness. And I'm sure somebody watching this or listening is like, wow, you sound pretty unprepared too. How can you judge the great one? Well, I'm guessing kind of in the same boat as Dwayne, where I made the decision to do this. He's making the decision because, you know, he's the boss at WWE. And if you are just listening on SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I just did finger quotes when I said the boss or running things. I don't really remember what I did finger quotes for, but Dwayne just seemed lost in the segment. And look, his movies are not great. And since he's been back, I don't think he's made great TV. Last week, he did 45 minutes in the first hour of SmackDown. Before that, that day, he did 21 minutes online. So, like, I don't know what people are thinking about this Dwayne Johnson return. I said to the boys, I think it's a double agent situation. He's going to screw Roman somehow. But the fact that, you know, I do like the blurring of lines, reality. Yeah, he's on the board, but how much decision-making privilege does he have? I mean, only time will tell, and we'll find out. But then, of course, it came out that he has a say on who goes into the Hall of Fame this year. Now, I do like how they have rolled these out. It was Heyman, it was Bull Nakano, and then it was the U.S. Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda on Friday. Our show came out Friday morning. The announcement came out Friday afternoon. And if you go back to that Friday show, who said Mike Rotunda should be put into the Hall of Fame? It was me. And me all along. And 21 other names I think I mentioned. But that's besides the point. I was right. And now Joe will never hear the end of me being right again. U.S. Express, of course, they were at the first WrestleMania. After you're done watching or listening to this, go check out Peter Rosenberg's interview on Cheap Heat with both guys. It was a great interview about wrestling back then. Of course, Mike Rotunda's sons are Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas. Some good Bray and Bo stories as well. But I'm glad to hear that those guys are getting in. I like the new rollout. And if Dwayne has a say and if he's responsible for that, I love it. But now they're saying his grandmother might get put into the Hall of Fame. Not sure how I feel about that. I believe my list of people that I listed on the show Friday and on my Twitter means more than what his grandmother did. I mean, some of the names include Elizabeth, Cyndi Lauper. I'm just going to pull up my Twitter and do this now because there's just so many people in the WWE Hall of Fame that need to be in there, and they're not. And look, I know that the WWE Hall of Fame is basically just a popularity contest. Where are we at? We gotta be close. We gotta be close. Okay, here is the list of people that I said should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. Elizabeth, Cyndi Lauper, Sable, Bam Bam Bigelow, Demolition, Midnight Express, Jim Cornette, Brian Pillman, Chyna as an individual honoree, Ivan Koloff, Lex Luger, Kamala, Sid, Rick Martel, King Kong Bundy, Adrian Adonis, Mike Rotunda, and so many others. The talent I listed there are way more worthy of a Hall of Fame than The Rock's grandmother. If you agree with me, cool. And if you don't agree with me, leave a comment on social media or in the video comment section here on YouTube. I did get to watch The Dark Side of the Ring with John Tenta. And talk about a guy that was so loved and was a good guy and essentially passed away because he was kind of stubborn to go to the doctor. So my PSA for anybody and everybody watching and listening is, if you're not feeling well, go to the doctor. They'll be able to know what's going on. Oh, I know my body. No. If something's wrong, go to the doctor. John Tenta had blood clots and ended up passing away from a very curable form of cancer. So Vice is where you can find Dark Side of the Ring. The episode with John Tenta is available on demand most places. And this week, I believe, is the Sandman. So that's kind of cool because I'm working a show with Sandman on next Saturday. Earlier, I had mentioned about me getting into boxing. How did I get into boxing? My interest, not the way you would think. I've been a UFC fan forever. Jake Paul. When Jake Paul started doing the celebrity influencer boxing, it kind of caught my attention. And then everything Jake has done since he started really has made me a fan of him. We see what his brother Logan's doing in WWE right now. And then I started just watching boxing. So it came out on Thursday that Jake Paul and Mike Tyson are going to have a fight July 20th, AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas. Now, this is where the Dallas Cowboys play. And if you've ever been to AT&T Stadium, you know it's really fucking big. I've been to 2 WrestleManias there. I've been to football games there. I've been to concerts there. And when I lived in Dallas, I had to do that stadium tour 15 times because anybody that came to visit wanted to go do the stadium tour. It is a very large venue for this, and I am here for it. Now, if SummerSlam wasn't a week or so after, I probably would go to Dallas, but that I can't do 2 trips like that. And it's happening on Netflix. Netflix getting into live sports, of course. In 2025, they are the home for Monday Night Raw. 660 million reported subscribers to Netflix. And of course, I know they're trying to crack down on people sharing passwords, but there is probable potential of 1 billion people watching this fight. And I know you're probably thinking, what are you talking about? But seriously, not everyone's going to watch it, but the amount of people that will, it's going to have record numbers. And I'm excited to see what Netflix does with this event because they're going to have Monday Night Raw. And in foreign countries, I believe they get the PLEs as well. So Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. Mike Tyson is 30 years older than Jake Paul. But if you've seen his training videos, the guy still looks 22. He is a beast and has power behind both fists. And I feel bad for Jake Paul. I'm not going to lie. But then again, seeing what Jake Paul has done, it's going to be an entertaining fight. And if you're watching this Jake Paul, or you are somebody that knows Jake Paul, please tell him, Jake, talking to you, buddy. Love what you're doing. I think it's awesome. But when you get into the ring with Mike Tyson on July 20th, please dress as Little Mac from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Because if you don't, it is a lost opportunity. Told you, no edits. Grab a drink here. So, like I said, at the jump, the 4 of us are trying to create more content. So we have 2 shows a week. This is the first go. You know, basically, I just felt there was so much going on with combat sports Maybe some weekends it'll be about the indies, whether it's shows I work on, shows I go to, something I see on Triller TV. It used to be Fight, and they have access to all these great independent promotions. AIW out of Cleveland, of course. We've talked about GCW a bunch over the last year or two. So go check that out, Triller TV. Don't forget, subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're watching. Rate, leave a review. That definitely helps us out. And of course, our audio listeners, wherever you are in the world, subscribe. It really helps out. Leave a comment or review. Tell a friend. And if you are so inclined and like what you hear, we have merchandise for sale too at whatamaneuver.net. So thank you for watching wherever you are in the world. Have a great Sunday. Have a great week. And we'll talk to you on Friday. That Wrestling Podcast.
Thanks for watching That Wrestling Podcast on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. And for more That Wrestling Podcast content, follow @ThatWrestlePod on social media.